This is becoming a bit of a regular FESPA feature for me, doing the Tech Time sessions. And normally my industrial one comes later in the week when everybody's had a few drinks and settled down a bit. But it's the first one of the show this time. It's taken us about 2 hours to find our way to the theatre, but we're here. And what we're going to talk about is really the influence of industrial digital print on the rest of the market, how it's disrupting other technologies, how it's playing its own role as part of a manufacturing process. And it all sounds very, very boring, but as was proved when we did it last year, and it's available on YouTube, we can entertain. I've got a panel of distinguished people. For the third year running, I'll say that I scraped them off the aisles and dragged them up to join me here. I have one newcomer this year, and the other three are repeat offenders. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves one at a time. Let's start with Joseph, my newcomer.
So Joseph Mergui, CEO of Caldera. Thank you to be so many people in front of us today. So what would you like me to say?
Tell us who you are.
Okay, I'm French, so I know it sounds strange sometimes. I am the founder and CEO of Caldera. Caldera is a software company doing RIP software. So RIP doesn't mean rest in peace, it means raster image processor. And we have evolved from RIP to color management, automation, workflow, and soon 3D.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Wozni, sir.
A repeat offender, I think.
A repeat offender.
Repeat offender.
One of my favorites, but don't tell the other two.
Well, thank you. So my name is Mike Wozni. I work for EFI, based in Meredith, New Hampshire, which is where all of EFI's inkjet solutions are managed. EFI's got a wide range of inkjet products that work in either the industrial markets, the ceramic markets, the graphics market, which you see here, industrial textile. So a wide range of inkjet solution products for a lot of different markets.
No sales. I said that last year.
No sales, sorry. But you asked me for what
That's
you
okay.
wanted me to describe.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
cool. That's cool.
All right. I'm sorry.
John.
Please learn from me. No sales.
No sales, John.
Hi, my name's John Mills. I'm the CEO of Inca Digital. Inca's in the wide format business. We make very large printers for both graphics and industrial, similar to EFI. So we're based in the UK, and we sell globally around the world, and we see a lot of interest in industrial.
And finally, last but not least, our component supplier.
The most offensive repeat offender. My name's Richard Darling. I'm from Xaar. We manufacture print heads, piezoelectric print heads, mainly for industrial processes, but our heritage is in the graphics field, where probably the first inkjet revolution took place, replacing screen. There's still a little bit of screen about, but mainly it's inkjet.
Ouch.
And that's our mission. It's to replace analog print technologies wherever possible, using inkjet.
Thank you, Richard. He didn't say he was a component supplier this time.
But I am.
Yeah,
Just a mere supplier of components.
Thank you. Now I'm going to start. This isn't pre-scripted at all, so anything could happen, as people who either came along last year or have watched it subsequently on YouTube will know. It can. We try to entertain as well as inform. And I know we've got some of the same people who will see this, but the whole concept of what is industrial print, and these three will yawn because I ask it every year, but what does industrial print mean and how much it changed actually? Or let's start with what your interpretation of industrial print compared with graphics. Let's start with you because you've got the microphone.
Just a suggestion to get a fresh view, why don't we start with Joseph, because he's new to the panel, and I bet you've got an opinion, Joseph.
Because I thought that was a bit unfair. We can start with Joseph.
Okay, so when I hear industrial, I feel I hear the big machines. I hear things that are repeated in millions of numbers. But in fact, I've discovered that industrial printing is how to make, how to print things that will be used by consumers. For example, if I print an iPhone cover and I do it in masses, that will be an industrial process. If I print your bottle of water, it's going to be to masses, it's an industrial process. If I print glass or textile or wood laminates and I sell it in millions of square meters, that's what I would consider an industrial printing type of job. So at Caldera, we do the software. So we have people who come from the shoe industry and they say, I'm about to print on a shoe. I want to build a certain kind of machine that will print on a shoe. Can you help us put the dots at the right place with the right colors, and so on and so on. If a manufacturer of membranes, the membranes for machines, is coming to us and say, I want to create a new machine. So we call this the industrial aspect of the printing business. Maybe Mike?
Yeah, thank you for suggesting that, Richard, because it was a very different view. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great perspective, Joseph. And I mean, from an EFI, or just in general, from my perspective, just to put a little more context around it, our thought around industrial is where inkjet is part of a process. You know, inkjet doesn't make the final product. It's part of a process, a manufacturing process, where there are other steps either before or after. And inkjet is just part of that. So it's measured, like you said, in large scales, thousands, millions of units. It's obviously lots of volume, but inkjet is part of that process, is how we look at it from an industrial perspective.
One of you two, John.
Yeah, just sort of picking up from Joseph's comment there. I think for us, if you look around here now, all of the images you see are graphics because they serve no purpose other than to inform. They're not sort of something that has a secondary function. So when we think of industrial, we think of two things. One, whether it's a standalone print application, because we sell printers and they typically go to somewhere and they just print on a product, and once it's been printed, that's it. It is the final product. In an industrial application, where we might print on a piece of board, that board might get put into a piece of furniture, or there may be some sort of process that goes through some chemical process and then ends up in some other component. So for us, industrial is the separation between a single point where we actually sell a machine and print and that's it, versus actually having to work with other people. So industrial is more complicated because it typically means we have to work with somebody else rather than just selling a standalone piece of equipment that just sits there and prints. And typically that is more complicated because other people have their idea of where the production works. We have to fit in with the way industry works today. So the way that we would like to print is not necessarily the way that the industry currently works. And trying to change an industry at the same time of introducing digital, I think, is one of the big barriers to adoption of digital, because there's so much infrastructure in the analog print that unless we actually are able to help them transition from that analog world to a digital world, then we will fail.
Richard?
An industrial process, I think, is is a process for separation or combination of materials for a change of purpose. And in this business that FESPA addresses, then it's graphic communication. So in inkjet, we would be depositing fluids onto a surface to give a communication. But in most industrial processes, we're assuming that it might be a color. It might be a CMYK suite, or it might have white, might be spot colors. But it's not necessarily the case. It could be functional fluid. In our particular case, an industrial print actually includes other technologies besides inkjet. But in in inkjet, then it's depositing a fluid for a purpose, in measured quantities, with measured frequencies, in a measured grid of pixels. Whether it's actually printing on a water bottle or printing on a banner or a poster, what makes it industrial is that the process is designed to deliver something. And it's usually continuous. It could be, to take Joseph's point, it could be something that's continuous and high volume, it could be something that's continuous and low volume, or it could be something that's batch. But it's a production method. Now, one of the questions that I asked earlier was whether print should be a sector on itself. Should there be an exhibition that addresses print? And we're coming up with Drupa in a couple of months, and it's just print. But print is actually more so than just being a standalone industry, because it's not addressing documents anymore. It is actually part of every other industry, and certainly from an inkjet perspective, that's true. So most of the things that we're involved with are not what you would consider to be print. And I guess that's true of many of the other guys as well.
I mean, one of the things that I've always seen as a driver for more now for the industrial side, and we haven't actually mentioned it that much. I mean, we talk about the industrial side being disruptive, all the things it can do, the benefits in terms of the advantages over screen print for general control, but one of the key elements surely has to be the opportunity for customization for variable data. Who'd like to start on this one? I mean, from a software perspective, you really get the tough bit here, don't you?
Yeah, when it comes to VDP, variable data printing, we are touching a sensitive topic here, because this is where inkjet can express really its strength by delivering the capability to customize products on the identification, the barcode, the name of a customer, the present. So we can really do things that are really impressive. At Caldera, we are very close to Adobe, so we have decided very early in our architecture to implement the Adobe PDF print engine with the PDF VT capability. The VT is the variable technology, so we can rip a job which will have a million difference between the print number 1 and the print 1 million. So definitely the variable data printing is taking us to a place where we can create as much customization we want and still be able to track the pack of drug or the perfume or the gift that you offer in one sample, but printed a million times to a million different persons.
But also from an identity point of view, it can be quite important too, in packaging, in product marking, in coding.
Definitely, we are not talking anymore about wide format printing. We are talking here about everything that can be printed, including ceramic, glass, laminates, anything which will need at some place an identification character to be able to track the object, or to. But it could be also in variable data printing. As it was said before, it doesn't have to be a color or a text. It can be also an RFID. It can be some information which is written with a conductive ink or something like that. It can be anything.
Okay, who wants to pick up on this next? Should we keep going this way?
Yeah, I think.
And then I won't get lost.
No, we're not
Sophie, we can do it differently every single time
Can
because
we?
we're digital.
We can. With a variable data
Cartoons.
audience crew.
Well, I mean, the VDP part of it is certainly one of the advantages of inkjet. The other one is just time to market as well. When you include inkjet as part of the process, previous to inkjet, it could take months to bring something new to market for somebody. With inkjet incorporated into your process, in an industrial process, those months become weeks, could even be days. So your time to market as a marketeer, you can react quicker. You could be more customized with your messaging to get a better return, because not only are you able to customize your output, but you can also bring it to market sooner. So that's the other advantage of being able to do something digitally with inkjet in an industrial type of process.
Go on then, Richard, if you want to make a mess of my lineup. John.
I think that the challenge with inkjet is that it really comes down to ink, I think. Because if you take corrugated, everybody is thinking corrugated is one of the big opportunities in industrial, but post-press flexo inks are €2 or €3 a kilo, and you know what people need to charge for an inkjet ink is at least 10 to 20 times the cost of a flexo ink. So if you look at high volume corrugated as an industrial application, there has to be some value in digital in order for the corrugated guys to pay 10 to 20 times as much for the ink. And so until you actually get the marketing dollars figuring out how to use the inkjet and the customization to generate revenue from the packaging, then it's going to be difficult to actually for the guys to invest in that technology to adopt it. And so if you look at some of the successful applications, so ceramic tiles, one of the reasons why ceramic tiles was so successful was it's a non-contact print. So the old-fashioned way of printing ceramic tiles was a contact print, and the tiles had to be quite thick because with a contact print the tile would break. When you went to inkjet, it was non-contact, so you can make the tile thinner, and the tile was thinner, so you used less material. It wasn't as heavy, so it's cheaper to ship around. So actually, the ink became zero cost because actually the cost of manufacturing the tile and shipping it to the customer was lower, and therefore the ink cost was irrelevant. So unless the industrial application, you find a metric that allows the ink to effectively be zero cost, you won't adopt it digital because no one was going to put marketing requirements ahead of operational costs. So you need to get the operational cost down, and that has to be some other metric other than ink cost to actually drive the application. So the challenge we all face is we understand in ceramics that it was thick, thin tiles. We know about fabrics, it's all about time to market and getting to the latest fashions and all of those things. But when we look at corrugated and some of the other applications, what is it in that application that's going to make the ink zero cost? And that's the challenge that we face for all of these industrial applications.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. I think you actually need to hit the economic tip point for any digital process or change of process to take place. In the case of ceramic tiles, then yeah, that's true. Contact with the tile, breakages in tiles, downtime as a result, wasted materials, and it resulted in a more costly process. But there's something even more fundamental than that happened in ceramics, is that it was on a plan and provide basis. So the designers of tiles predicted what consumers wanted, then they printed tiles with gravure processes with the traditional view of efficiencies, which is produce many all the same. Then they put them in stock and hoped that customers would buy everything that was in stock. So it was a push process. In the economic crisis of 2007, 8 and beyond, they had all of their money tied up in stock and an uncertain situation as to whether it is a fashion business, whether the tiles would go out of fashion before they sold them. So they had a lot of risk, and they had no money to run their operations. So they had to change from push to pull, respond to customer, and inkjet gave them that possibility. So the whole of the ceramics industry became more efficient as a result, and there was a sort of stampede to digital. Now, we may not see that in other industries, but the same equation is true. You have to hit the economic trigger, and then when you hit the economic trigger, it's not always that obvious how you calculate it. For example, in packaging, if you can take somebody who's doing billions of bottles of fizzy pop, then they're probably buying their materials at the best price, and they've eked out the materials so they use as little as possible. Now, what digitization does is it introduces some more expensive materials because they are by their very nature more expensive to produce, so that you can get them through an inkjet print head. But if you can, by doing away with the label substrate, you can decorate that container, and then it has some end-of-life benefits as well. Plus, as Joseph says, variable data, you can actually engage your consumers in conversation. You don't have to plan a promotion ahead. You can respond to the demand at the time, so you change from push to pull. Now, that's a really difficult economic equation, comparing one situation with another. So those two scenarios, they really need some weighing up. But I think on balance, the materials, the price per kilo of ink, or the this, that, and the other, is more for inkjet and digital, but the benefit is clear. So it's not just straight on operational costs. And if you look at the most famous packaging campaign, the Share a Coke campaign, that actually costs an awful lot of marketing dollars, but it actually gained an awful lot of marketing share and consumer awareness as well. So that's even more complicated. Now, if you could do that Share a Coke campaign with an effective digital delivery means, then you could fit it to the operational budget and get the marketing upside as well. So that's the industrial quest, really.
I think you get overlaps because obviously the ceramics model is certain areas of that you actually get in textile as well, where you've seen the distance or the time and the logistics between design to delivery whittled down to days, and you don't get the waste. We've talked about the other bits, but we haven't actually talked about waste reduction. Ceramics, again, is a classic one. Not only breakage, but also the pollution.
Well, in textiles, there's different sorts of waste. You've got the waste, of course, because the main thing is the textiles are in fashion business, so designs go out. So it's the overruns that then have to be shipped to a third country, usually a developing market, so that they can actually find a new market there at a lower price just to get some money back for them. Then you've got the logistics of moving things around the world. Now, it could be that the whole model changes so that things, there's famously, things aren't made in America has been the way of the past. But the ideas come from America, and the American market is very demanding of ideas. So it may be the case that things are made in America because that's closest to market. So the digital processes in the industrial process could find that they change even geography.
Well, I think they're doing that already, and later in the week I'm doing a 1-hour tech time on backshoring and how we're localizing stuff because of mass customization. John, you got something else to add, or do you want me to drift on to the next?
I think you should drift.
I'll drift to the next kind of topic, which it kind of follows on. I mean, we wandered a bit from the VDP side there. Obviously, if we're to go back to looking at industrial print as part of manufacturing, you are dependent on the rest of the production line and the materials. And materials, as we know, if you're looking at screen printing, you can pretty much screen onto anything because it's very forgiving. How big a handicap has that been to the inkjet production side of people in particular, getting acceptable materials, even though you got the benefits of smaller units, more compact units? John?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back again. Ink, I think, is that we haven't got an ink person here. So we have a printhead guy. We have to, this combination of the two, because we integrate, we bring in ink and we bring in a head, and we have software, electronics and motion systems and all those things to create the inkjet printer. But the really difficult bit is the ink, because the constraints on the fluid are it has to be certain viscosity, surface tension, it has to have the right particle dispersions, and those things are degrees of freedoms or restraints on chemistry that make it very, very difficult for analog guys who have got a process to actually get the same functionality from a digital ink as an analog ink. So an interesting one today is that luxury vinyl tiles and vinyl flooring. So if you want to actually buy vinyl flooring, it's very similar to floor tiles, but the challenge today is that we need an ink that can be inkjet and survive the process and give the right end user properties and to be able to be laminated on at the top. And today, I'm not sure the ink exists. The demand exists, the economics exist, the machines exist, but I'm not sure that there is an ink that actually works. As soon as there is an ink that works, I think that's an application that will take off. And if anybody watches this and they have got an ink that works, please come and talk to us. But a lot of people will say we've got an ink, but actually when it goes through and you do trials and you put it through the final process and they go and take it to the end users and they do the end user trials, it doesn't quite meet the performance. So I think it is incredibly difficult for the chemist to achieve the same end user properties with the additional constraints that inkjet places on it. So I think many of these applications are limited by the chemist's ability to produce an ink that will inkjet and give the end user performance. So
Should we not be calling it ink? Because it's not really ink, is it? It's a coloured fluid.
yes, but if
I
you call
never
it
get the word in fluid.
if you call it anything else, it gets even more expensive. That's the problem.
But the moment you say ink, you tend to come back to the traditional colour set, don't you? And I
Well-
think that's where a lot of this has gone wrong. I'll come back to you, but we've stuck with the CMYK model largely, apart from textile and ceramics. Do you think this is why there's a difficult question? I don't even
Well-
know what I'm asking you. But
It is kind of interesting, right? So as the manufacturers of hardware, the cost, the resolution, the improvements that have been made, Richard has enabled us to print things faster at higher resolutions. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, but as the
Enough.
market matures and we reach into other applications, spot on in terms of the next difficult component is the fluid. Because everything. If I think through all the industrial applications that I've been lucky enough to see, everything has been enabled or started with a specific fluid for that application, for that industrial application. And so as the market matures, as the technology becomes more mainstream, that's where the investments are being made. If you look at the different providers of those fluids, they just don't have one PhD chemist anymore. They have 5, 7, 10 PhD chemists that are developing those unique technologies that can be jetted, that can be part of those industrial solutions. So that's where you're starting to see some of that development take place. Because on the hardware side, we're there. We can print at high rates of speed with great resolution reliably. Now the development's being done on the fluid side, which is enabling those industrial types of applications to develop. For sure, it's more than just CMYK. There are other colors that are required depending on the application. Fluorescence is becoming mainstream as well. So it's an interesting part that's developing in the industrial segment, which is really focused on the fluids.
But also, I was going to ask Joseph, without the software to be able to control this, you're going to be nowhere anyway, no matter how good the fluid is.
Well, recently we had a customer who asked me in CMYK, the K, is it for kilo or Kelvin? I say it's for knowledge. So definitely we have this issue with the fluids, with the chemistry. I think more importantly, I see it as a war. I see this inkjet business taking us into an economical and industrial war with mass production. I see that if Europe and America invent the right processes and inks and so on, we will not have to send our goods to be printed in Asia. We will be able to print personalized laminates, textile, banners, flags with great machines of Inca and EFI, with great heads of Xar and others. But I think really soon, I hope, I have a dream that my balance sheet will be taxed by CO2. Not the bullshit about CO2 taxes and so on, but really in my balance sheet. Because if my operation is, and I hope I'm not drifting here because I really want to bring
Drift away.
inkjet where it can be. If my balance sheet is taxed by the number of things I have imported with a certain quantity of CO2 and by certain things I have produced and produced the CO2 for producing them, in my balance sheet, I will try to make my CO2 signature as low as possible. So if I can buy raw textile in Asia and I can bring it with a clean boat, not a dirty boat, clean boat, to America or Europe, and I can print it in the quantities that will be really consumed by the user, so not to destroy all the garments which do not find any more customers, I think the whole economy will change. And I am, as a little software fighter in the digital world, I really want to fight for that. I really want to put inkjet where everywhere it can be used, from OLED to electronics to flags, textile, ceramic tiles, and laminates, and really bring the agility of science and technology into the hands back of the Western world, and dealing fairly with the Eastern world for everything they can provide us in quantity, in a better process, in a cleaner process, and in a more balanced process.
I'm just trying to think how to word this. I mean, what you say makes a lot of sense, but would you not agree from where you are that without the software, you can't do it?
If you let me talk about software and me, I will
Let's
will
give
take
John
the whole
a go.
day.
I think it's John's turn.
No,
I'll
no.
ask you-
From software perspective, definitely, we are at the crossroad. I very oftenly compare Caldera to a tire manufacturer, because we have Michelin, which is a French manufacturer. So Michelin is making the tires for car manufacturers. So we do the software for printer manufacturers, and then we ask what would be the application so we could build the best software. If you tell me your application is ceramic, I know I will have to manage headaches with colors that are not CMYK, but cobalt, beige, gray, and others. If you tell me that your problem is printing on electronics, definitely the problem will not be the color of the ink, but how sure you are to put the dot next to the next dot, so to the next dot, so that the circuitry is working properly. And then we go to vision systems and so on. So definitely software is important, the same way as when you buy a car, you want to be sure you have good tires and not have a puncture or the car go off-road because you are using the wrong tires. So definitely software is very important. And I'm glad that 25 years ago, I had the opportunity to create Caldera, so to be today with you and share my appetite for progress with you.
So let's ask John. I mean, we're going all over the place now, but I mean, your shift at Inca, there has been a definite shift, hasn't there?
Yeah, I think the thing with software is that what digital means complexity for your operation. Because if you go back in screen print, which is effectively the industry that's changed the most radically over the last sort of 15 years, if you went back to 15 years ago, Inca produced the first UV flatbed, and it would print 5 sheets per hour, and a small fraction of work would be done digitally at very low volume, at very high margin, and people could deal with that level of complexity. If you went back now and you took a high performing machine from EFI or from us and put it into a customer at that point, they would have no idea how to deal with that level of complexity, because there are hundreds of different stores that have different information for each store that's printed. There are different jobs that are printed. Sometimes it's 10 sheets, sometimes it's 20. That complexity, if you walk into any customer, particularly in the US, you'll see a factory and 15 or 20% in the corner is the digital print, and the rest of it is to deal with fulfillment and complexity. And so that industry has evolved as the machines have got faster and faster. They've learned to deal with the complexity, learned to get the runs, the short run length, and the diversity from their customer base, and deliver that level of complexity and short run lengths to their end users. So that's taken years to evolve. So the challenge with any industry today is that if it's analog, it typically will be very long run lengths. So they'll do one job, one print. It will last for maybe a day, produce 15 kilometers of the same thing, and then they'll sell that. And so they're dealing with very, very small numbers of jobs. The complexity is very easy. if you suddenly say, right, now I'm going to buy a digital press, and in order to get the economics to work, I need to have very short run lengths, because if I go to longer run lengths and suddenly my ink price dominates. So the only way the economics work is if I get my run length down. If I have my run length down and I have a high productivity machine, it means I need thousands of short run lengths. So if you put a very, very high speed digital press into an industry that is not used to that, the biggest challenge they're going to have is, how do I suddenly go from having one or two big jobs to thousands of short jobs overnight? And so that whole customer base, do the jobs come in on a internet-based website? How do you get from that through to the workflow, through EFI, so in a workflow like EFI, through a RIP, there to the print? Then what do you do with all of that complexity afterwards? How do you get all of those thousands of different jobs packaged to each individual customer? That's the challenge that we need to have. Actually, the print bit, I don't want to undersell what we do, but I think the print bit actually is the easy part. You know, the challenge of getting stuff all the way through and dealing with that is very difficult. So I think that it's just going to take time for industries to evolve, to learn how to deal with the complexity. So my worry for guys who are kind of going straight in with big single pass printers is, who the hell's going to buy them? Because, you know, you've got to have that infrastructure. So I think the way that new applications will evolve is that they will have smaller machines. They'll learn the value proposition of digital within their industry, and that will take several years to evolve. And eventually, when they've understood the economic value, they've actually got the infrastructure in place, then they'll go for the very high throughput machine. So I think the mistake that we could make, and I don't think we are making, is that we're trying to push very, very fast machines too early. I think the industry needs several years of smaller machines, learn the value proposition before we scale up. So,
Richard, did you have something you wanted to add on that?
I think we're talking about getting data and materials down together in a process, and in this industry you see some fast printers, the scanning printers, that they're in the, I saw one that was 100 meters an hour, 100 square meters an hour, and I guess that's from my background in wide format graphics, that's kind of normal, maybe at the top end, maybe, but I just want to go through
Where have you been?
Well, I'll tell you that I wanted to compare that with another process where we're actually dealing with a continuous single pass printer that's 2.1 meters wide and producing over 100 meters a minute. And there's no one part of that image is the same as another.
Is that the Himan?
That's a Human machine, and there are others that are similar. Then if you go on to label presses, that's kind of easy because you produce the labels and people don't use the digital capability because they still have to get that reel of labels to the side of a production line to put on an applicator to get onto a package, and they can't really register the messaging with the package. But when you start printing directly onto a container, you can actually have everyone different, everyone designed. It could be for the consumer. So the flow of data is incredible. Now, there is something else that I didn't address before, that the interface on the materials, Mike's absolutely right, that every reputable printer manufacturer actually has a plethora of scientists, PhD chemists and materials, and the interface between printhead manufacturers, ink producers, EFI being one, and printer companies, OEMs, is actually pretty, that's where the stuff's all sorted out. So the print business, I'd agree with you, John, is quite easy in that respect because it's all taken care of by the experts. The flow of data is yet to be explored, and making sure that data actually gets there with the correct adjustments that are necessary to get the imaging correct. But there are processes already existing that are where that flow of data, compared to this industry, it's immense and it's already there. It's just that if you were producing posters with that volume, there wouldn't be any trees. The whole place would be congested with advertising. So in the built environment, the built surfaces, whether it's ceramic tiles, whether it's actually the flooring or the furniture that you're actually working at, that's all digitally produced, and it adds variety to our lives. Now,
It's meaningful stuff, isn't it? You want to add something?
That's where, thank you for your comments, but that's where I see the FESPA audience, the screen printers, being ready for the next type of devices. I see, when I came first at FESPA, it was a screen printing show. Now it's an inkjet show. When I will come, I remember in 2008, I came to my first Drupa, it was an analog show. 2012, I was an exhibitor as a digital inkjet player. And 2016 will be an inkjet show again. I think what is very important to understand is that the people who were used to be seen by us as wide format printers for visual communication can at any time grab the opportunity be something else. They can buy machines to be in packaging, they can buy machines to be in glass printing, they can buy machines to be in textile printing. That's the beauty of inkjet. You don't have to have a family that is a dynasty in textile or a dynasty in packaging to become yourself a printer in packaging. This is, for me, what is democratic with inkjet, is that the son of the butcher can become a printer, and a very successful one, in any type of application, because inkjet will give him the capability to step in the business without belonging to a family who owns a Heidelberg machine they bought 110 years ago. This is what I love in inkjet.
I mean, just moving slightly to the other end of the operation, if you like. One of the things I always said about graphics was that for the end customer, he doesn't care how it's been printed. It could be digital, it could be analog, it could be children with wax crayons. As long as the job looks right, the quality's okay, the price is right, and it was done on time. I think there's more of a challenge with industrial print, because how much does the actual end customer care about how his product, and it's not the print, it's the complete product. How much does he care how it's been produced? He doesn't.
Can I also just, we've got to very, very quickly give somebody else a turn. But there's a campaign that's been running printing on bottles. It's a Belgian campaign for Martin's Brewery. It's about a Belgian TV show called, I think it's FC de Kampioenen. It's Kampioenen Beer is the campaign. It's actually inkjet printing directly onto beer bottles. And it's a range of the different TV characters, and it's linked with augmented reality, so that if you scan the face, then the character starts talking to you. So it's a very clever campaign enabled by digital. Now, the interesting thing is that campaign's been running at sort of 12,000 bottles an hour in a brewery, and it was the prototype machine as a route to the full-scale machine that's going in. That prototype machine's not perfect. So when you look at it from a printer's point of view, there's something that opens up, and I think this is very interesting for all printers to take note of. If you show that to a printer, they will look at it carefully, and they'll immediately see the imperfections. If you show it to a consumer, they couldn't care about the imperfections, because what they actually see is what it's talking to them about, what it's telling them, what it does for them. And we've got a term, we're just calling it print snobbery. A print doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good enough. And in the print industry, there is a sort of disease or an illness of print snobbery, where we tend to look for the flaws and criticize anything that we see as a printer, rather than actually seeing what the thing's there to communicate or do. Now, if you've got a dashboard on a Bentley and it's printed wood and it's got a line in it, you're not going to be very pleased. So perfection is sometimes necessary, but not all the time. And that campaign was really interesting because it did split up reaction between printers and people.
So you're saying we're not selling crop marks?
Yeah.
So it is kind of interesting because, you know, today on the graphics part of the market, customers that are buying printing, they sell campaigns. They don't care whether it was printed on a board printer. They don't care if it was printed on a UV roll-to-roll. They just want to know, they want to have a consistent color across all their individual elements, and they want it quick turn, right? The days when you had weeks to pull together a campaign, that they want it same day, and they want it at a great price. And you know, as the markets have gotten to the points where we are today, where it's more about, the consumer really doesn't matter to them, how it was manufactured, how it was reproduced. They just want it at a great price, and they want to be able to buy something that's functional, that works for an extended period of time, and they don't want to pay a lot for it. So that's really where things have gotten. It is interesting as a printer. What do? You pull out your loop and you go right up to something. And my family always makes fun of me because any direct mail piece that comes to the house, I'm looking at, and my kids are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, this is just what Daddy does, right?" So it's what the industry does. And it's worth on the graphics part of the market because you go up to a sign and you're looking at it really close and people are looking at you like, there's something wrong with you. I'm like, no, I'm a printer. So it is interesting how we've gotten to where we are from that perspective.
But I think in the graphics sector, it's visual. In the industrial sector, a lot of it isn't relying on the visual quality. Would you not agree with that?
It's interesting.
Particularly barcoding, you're going to get wound up about the quality of the sell-by date.
Well, if you see that black sign over there, the ETS sign there. So if you look at that, as consumers, you'd look at that with the zebra, and it looks fine. So I kind of been looking at going, there's banding through the black, right? So black's quite tough to print. So I'm looking at that, and I can see the banding through there.
He can hear you.
I know. But so whoever's printed that machine is not set up, right? So you're absolutely right. Inkjet snobbery. And if you walk around now and you see a machine printing, so if we've got a machine at a show and it's not printing very well, then we'll stick a map on it, or we'll stick something with a lot of text and things that's very, very busy.
You're giving away the trade secrets.
So if you want to see whether a machine's printing really well, so something like Superman back here, big areas of pastel blues and dark reds and black. So that's a much better print than the black over there. So but the people who really care are the print buyers. So when a printer is selling, he's selling to a print buyer. So the print buyer will come along and he'll spot the banding, he'll have his loop out, and he'll be looking at all these. But as the consumers don't care because nobody else is going to walk past that black sign and care that there's banding, right? But I think with industrial, the bar is a lot higher, right? Because there is actually tests to pass. So it has to pass this test, it has to pass this test. There's no metric, there's no sign. I've gone around and I've been to hundreds of customers and I've seen the quality of their output. And some customers, the quality is incredibly high, and others I kind of think, how on earth do you get away with sending that out? And so there isn't any real standard. It's what they can get away with, what's economical. But as soon as you get into industrial, then you have to achieve certain standards. And it doesn't become subjective. It becomes completely objective around standards that you need to meet within that process. So we're kind of fortunate within print, because as long as somebody else likes it, then we're fine. And most of the time, the people we buy from, as long as they believe that their print buyer will accept it, they're fine. And so that's the difference.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's very rare that you come across something and somebody goes, well, that's our digital version of that. Because it does have to be seamless. It does have to be, almost exactly the same. Nobody repositions something as being digital and therefore inferior or something different.
But when it's a functional product, not a graphic product, and okay, ceramics is a classic example where it's a bit of both. Flooring, obviously you've got visual as well as the fact that it performs a function. Joseph, how do you see this one? Because, if you're selling to an end customer, okay, you can sell on customization, which is the side that you do, and perhaps Mike does to an extent. But apart from that, you're actually selling it on usability or the role that it plays. It doesn't matter if it's banded, a lot of the purely functional stuff.
Well, I think we are in an era of mediocrity. We don't build cars as well as we built cars 50 years ago. We don't build objects as well as we built them 20 years ago. We are now used to trash our iPhone 6 because iPhone 7 just came in. I think at home I have iPhone 3, iPhone 4, iPhone 5, and for me iPhone 5 now is a brick of ugly metal and glass. It doesn't fit to my need anymore, despite the fact it's good enough. I think the wallpaper that was printed in East Germany 50 years ago was still sticking to the wall 50 years after. But in modern Europe, in modern world, you want the wallpaper to go away after a couple of years, like a glove, like a Kleenex. You know, I think we are entering in a world of mediocrity, which needs to be cheap enough, nice enough, functional enough to play the role it has to play for a short period of time. I don't think nobody wants to see this print be taken care after the show, folded properly to be reused next Vespa. It's a commodity. It's a Kleenex. So functional printing on pajamas to test the heart beat or the acidity of the sweat and so on will be a commodity. It will be printed and wasted after a week. Like now we have lenses wasted after a day. It's the world where we are living. We are wasting a lot, and now we want to waste and recycle. That's our only excuse about recyclability, is that we want to waste and have a good conscience. So for printing, it's the same. You're right. I mean, you're like me, I mean, or I'm like you. When I go to the airport, I get close to the poster like that to check if there is bending, if the screening is the one used by Caldera, so that I'm sure it is Caldera who have ripped that job or that job. But the reality, if it's 20 yards away, you don't give a shit. It's going to be wasted anyway. So I think the functional aspect, and sorry for my French, it's... I don't know how to say it in English properly.
It'd be far worse. The same word will do, actually.
So I think that the era we are in is about commodity. And I think inkjet will bring us to a place where it's cheap, it's nice, it's functional, it's personalized, customized, and it can be used for a very short period of time, because the next time we need to bring another message.
I think the interesting thing, though, that you're saying about, well, I would have used the word disposable, but you were a bit more graphic
I think we
about
can
it.
say, I
yeah.
mean, the iPhone she's using is disposable in a year and a half from now, because my 7-year-old daughter is now using my iPad, I don't know how much, and I have no regret. I just moved on.
But if you look at the amount of packaging that came with that iPhone, that's going to be thrown away much more quickly than the iPhone is.
So
but the
great.
actual print is probably more complicated because it's got to look good. That's the bit that sells it.
I think we are living in a world where Asia cannot be anymore the manufacturer of the world, where we can accept kids or very low-paid people work. I think we have to smooth these differences. Inkjet will help us smooth those differences. I want the packaging of my software be printed in Europe, maybe 2 blocks away from my place. I don't need to make it printed in volume in Asia, to see a ship bring those empty boxes to Europe. I think if we just do this calculation right, they will be paid more. We will sell to them more expensive things, and they will ship to us more functional things. So I think, yes, if it's disposable and we are ready to accept this with a good mood, then let it be.
And I'm going to be having a session on this on Thursday, people. But we're running out of time. So just as a roundup, I probably asked this last year. Well, we'll start this way now. Where do you think we're going to be in 12 months' time with all this industrial, functional stuff, Richard?
12 months is a long time in inkjet.
Oh, you said that last year. Let's
Did I?
try.
Oh, really?
2 weeks' time.
I think I said last year I was going to be in Amsterdam, didn't I?
Did I? How did I know that?
Last year I said I was going to be in Amsterdam, I think, because we knew it was going to be here,
Did we?
on an industrial print panel. That was
right.
my prediction.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
well,
but
you were
but
correct.
you said a year, and it's actually only been 9 months.
You're right.
Oh,
You're
there
right.
we
Yeah, well,
go.
that's the speed of the thing. I said 12 months is a long time in inkjet, so
Yeah, there
9
we
months
go.
is normally 12 months. I think there'll be some interesting things that happen this year. I mean, you mentioned packaging on an iPhone. I mean, like on carton. The materials part, I think, is getting there. I think they are inherently more expensive to make the materials to be jetted, but that doesn't mean to say that the processes will be uneconomical. Sophie, you mentioned wastage. That's focused on that. I think some of those equations, those cost-benefit equations, are being done in many different areas, and I think decisions have been taken already, and it's only a matter of time before the equipment buyers, the investors in this technology, actually come out into the open, and we'll see some things by this time next year. We will.
Is that 9 months?
9 months from
12
now,
months.
this time next year,
9 months, yeah.
we'll see some things that actually demonstrate the power of variable data, digital print, and a pull system. And nobody will be sort of looking at print quality saying, "Oh, I'm not sure that's quite right." They'll actually be looking at what the print actually communicates or what it shows, and it won't have to. It'll change the business model for some areas, like packaging, for example.
Thank you, John. A little rat. Can you remember what the question
Yeah,
was?
just
How many
just-
months?
12 months. So from now, so I think I know a number of things that are going to happen because we're involved in some of them. So I think in 12 months' time, I think we will see a huge transformation in corrugated. I think that'll be the next big change over the next 12 months. Not necessarily the delivery, but in terms of actually big players making a very significant move into digital. So that's kind of my prediction for the next 12 months. And I think, obviously, textiles has already started. That journey is well down the road. If you walk around now, we've even got our own textile hall. So I think textiles has made that move. I think corrugated will be next. After that, I think it's into deco, so flooring and wood laminates and that type of area there. But I think we're still waiting for inks in those sectors. And I think fluids. So yes, I think that's my prediction.
Mike.
So very similar. This is a big year. It's one of those years that comes around every 4 years. Inkjet is mainstream. It's much more reliable today at a lot higher quality. It's at a tipping point in that regard. When you combine that with the investments that are being made on the fluid side of things, this is the year this year will be the year where a lot of that comes together, and many of the segments that John mentioned. So it's a big year. It's exciting. It's great to be part of it, and look forward to seeing you in 15 months.
I'll invite you onto my next panel if I'm ever asked again. Joseph.
Well, for me, every year is special, and I feel like climbing Everest and then coming down and then another one higher than Everest. This year is special because we are switching from the caterpillar type of animal to the butterfly. We were viewed as wide format only. We are now moving to high-speed printing, to packaging printing, to textile printing, to label printing. In fact, inkjet gave us the magic to be present on everything that is printable. So for me, I didn't realize it was 25 years after I founded the company. It's like last week.
You don't look old enough.
It's a very special year, and definitely if everybody play its role in that year, I think we are in a year of transformation, and the printing business will not look like for the Drupa after this one.
Wow. Thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
We've slightly run over the time, but nobody was waving furiously from the back of the room. So I'd like to thank my lovely people. Thank you, Joseph, as a newcomer. And I hope you'll return if I ever get asked again. Mike, my favourite, thank you. John, my other favourite. And Richard,
Your
darling.
least favourite.
No, my most favourite. And the glasses. Don't forget the glasses. Thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.